Welcome to the Samurai 50 to 80 Skills Guide. In this guide, we will cover all of your skills as you train to be a weeb better than the rest of them, but also hopefully kill your enemies along the way. Watch as you go from this to this. This guide is framed in the mindset of players completely new to Final Fantasy XIV or the MMO genre in general. In that same vein, this will merely be an overview of the actions and how to use them. Optimal rotations are better left to their own in-depth videos, just due to how much complexity is involved in perfect openers and overall rotations. We will, however, be crafting openers as we go, to help new players understand what goes through creating openers, and give them a foothold to push themselves into being able to do it on their own. The goal is to be able to drop players in on the ground level, so they can make strides to improve themselves. All tooltips will be shown at the level cap for each section. 50 for when you first get the job in A Realm Reborn, 60 for Heavensward, 70 for Stormblood, and then finally at level 80 for Shadowbringers. I also recommend all players add Sprint and Limit Break to their hotbars, both found in the General tab of your Actions menu. And as for how my hotbars build, it'll make sense at 80. Just put skills on your hotbars in a way you feel comfortable using as you're leveling. Everyone has their own way of doing things. Let's begin. Obtaining Samurai is simple. Provided you own the expansions, at level 50 you will be able to undertake the job quest to obtain Samurai in Ul'dah, right outside the Aetheryte Plaza. It has no base class, so any battle class or job may pick this up. You must also complete your level 10 class quest from your starting guild and become certified to join other guilds, which is almost guaranteed to have been achieved just by normally playing the game. Upon becoming Samurai, you have a large list of skills to begin with. Rather than going through one at a time, I will go through sets of skills and their effects. By now you have a basic grasp on the game enough to handle it, but I recommend starting one of the other melee jobs first if you still feel yourself struggling. To start, you have an entire set of melee role actions. Be sure to find places for these with all of your samurai skills. Check the melee role actions guide in the description if you need an in-depth look at all of these skills. And let me give a preemptive apology for the butchering of skill names I'm sure to be about to do. Starting off, we'll talk about all of our single target attacks. Level 1, Level 18, and Level 40. Hakaze, Shifu, and Kasha. This is our first combo. If you've not learned by now, combos are displayed with a glowing border like shown here. I will not be going over base potencies of combo skills. Always aim to do your complete combos. You get no benefit out of skipping steps, except for an exception we'll cover later. Hakaze is our starting point, doing 200 potency and combos into Shifu. Shifu is a much higher 320 potency and puts up a 10% speed boost buff for 40 seconds. This length is huge, but it makes sense once you get into the later rotations of Samurai. You'll be using that entire timer just about. And then Shifu combos into Kasha. Kasha has a huge potency of 480 and grants Ka. That is one of your 3 Sen, the 3 icons of your UI element. From now on, I'll call it the flower icon from now on, as samurai names are often very hard to remember for many people. I'll come back to what we use Sen on later, after covering the full basic toolkit. In general, this combo is the single target combo you want to lead with, since faster attacks means more attacks and ties into the rest of your toolkit. If you don't have Shifu, get Shifu. Level 1, Level 4, and Level 30, Hakaze, Jinpu, and Gekko. Once again, we start with Hakaze, same as the last combo. We then combo into Jinpu, which is 320 potency just like Shifu. Instead of the speed buff, we get a 10% damage buff for 40 seconds. This is part of why we wanted to get Shifu done first. After we put up Shifu, we can get to Jinpu much faster. Then, we finish out this combo with Gekko, which is also 480 potency like Kasha. It grants us Getsu, which is the moon icon. So far, we want to start with the Kasha combo to get Shifu, and then go into the Gekko combo for Jinpu. Level 1 and level 50, Hakaze and Yukikaze. For the third time, we start with Hakaze, which then combos into Yukikaze. Yukikaze does 360 potency and includes no special buff, but it does grant us Setsu, the snow icon. In essence, we want to rotate through the combos in this order over and over. Kasha, Gekko, Yukikaze. There's more to it, but let's get over to the AoE first. Level 26 and level 45. Fuga and Oka. Fuga does a 100 potency hit to all enemies in a cone in front of you. It's a pretty big cone at that, but try to position yourself as best you can to hit all the enemies. And then combo into Oka. Oka is a 160 potency AoE to all enemies in a 5 yalm radius around you. You must alternate a wide cone and a circle. Oka has 2 effects. Firstly, it grants the flower icon. Secondly, if you have your Shifu speed buff active, Oka will add 15 seconds to the timer, up to the 40-second maximum. Because of this, if you have your buffs applied, you can keep them going even while doing AoE, which we want to go into AoE with 3 or more enemies in the fight. 3 is usually when every job starts to AoE, with few exceptions, and Samurai is not one of them. Level 26 and level 35, Fuga and Mangetsu. Once again, we start with Fuga and combo into a 160 potency Mangetsu. This gives us the moon icon and extends the Jinpu duration by 15 seconds. As we see now, our AoE skills can be essentially paired with our single target combos. Oka to the Kasha combo, and Mangetsu to the Gekko combo. But that's now 5 different skills that grant us Sen icons. Let's get into how we use those icons now. Level 30, Iaijutsu. This skill has a short channeling time, not quite an entire GCD, but enough to force you to stand still for a bit. This skill changes based on how many Sen you have, 1, 2, or 3. I'll go over each of the Iaijutsu separately. 1 Sen, level 30, Higanbana. Higanbana is a small base potency of 250 potency on hit, but has a massive 60-second dot for 40 potency per tick. A tick of a dot occurs every 3 seconds, meaning this dot will tick 20 whole times for a total of 800 potency. In complete total, that's 1050 potency for this attack before applying any buffs to it. This is a massive potency attack, but the downside is obvious. Unless you're putting this on a boss or otherwise an enemy that will last an entire minute, you can't really ever get that much of an effect out of Higanbana. In general, you won't use it outside of bosses. But bosses, make sure this is applied anytime it's not going to die soon. 2 Sen, level 40, Tenka Goken. With a 360 potency, this hits all enemies in a cone before you. This is the AoE Iaijutsu, which is why we have 2 different AoE combos, so we can Fuga, Oka, Fuga, Mangetsu, and finish with a Tenka Goken in AoE situations. I'll reiterate, 3 or more enemies we want to AoE. The bigger the pool, the more we want to AoE. Samurai AoE is extremely powerful, and gets even way stronger as we level up more. 3 Sen, level 50, Midare Setsugeka. Our reward for hitting 3 Sen is a massive 800 potency nuke Let me reiterate the power of Higanbana quick though. That was 1050 potency over the entire duration. I bring this up because Midare has been a noob trap in the past. Players see that 800 potency and the animation and end up ignoring Higanbana. Midare is super fun to use, but Higanbana is a lot stronger. Be sure to put Higanbana on bosses before going crazy with Midares. Be sure to use Midare in single or two target situations as it is called for. There are also 2 off-global abilities we have to go over. Level 6, Third Eye. This is a defensive buff for 3 seconds. The singular next attack will be reduced by 10% damage. This 15-second recast basically means you're able to spam it no matter the situation. Solo, in parties, just use it. It's free HP basically. However, do try to actually time it with taking damage, since 3 seconds is no time at all for the buff to last. This is extra useful in trials and raids, where lots of raid-wide damage is common. Pop this to increase your survival every single time. You will want to practice this too, especially for a certain job quest or 2, and a skill or 2 down the line. Level 50, Meikyo Shisui. This is a really good skill. On a 55-second recast, Meikyo negates all combo requirements for the next 3 skills you use, and gives you 15 seconds to use all 3 stacks. This is basically a Sen generator. We want to use this basically off cooldown the moment we finish a combo, and to use it for only Sen generating skills. For example, in AoE, we'll skip the Fugas. We can use Meikyo Shisui, then Mangetsu, into Oka, and right into Tenkagoken. Because Meikyo has no effect on Iaijutsu, we keep that third charge and can do another Mangetsu or Oka to immediately gain a Sen towards our next Tenkagoken. For single target, we can get an entire Midare out of this. Meikyo, Kasha, Gekko, Yukikaze, and finish with Midare Setsugeka. But mid-rotation, we'll just about never use it like this. We will see why when we go over the opener. We have one other skill to talk about first, but it's definitely saving the worst for last. Level 15, Enpi. This is our ranged attack and it does 100 potency to the target. You basically never want to use this skill at this point. You can use it to pull enemies in the overworld to make sure you don't fight multiple enemies at once and drag one away, but mid-fight, avoid this at all costs. Even if you have to not attack at all for a GCD or 2, it breaks combos and takes 2 uses just to be equal to 1 Hakaze. It's really, really bad at level 50. But with that quick note out of the way, let's get looking at our opener at level 50. All future openers will be building off of this one, so get used to it now. Hakaze, Shifu, Kasha, Hakaze, Jinpu, Higanbana, Gekko, Meikyo Shisui, Kasha, Yukikaze, Midare Setsugeka, Gekko, then start rotating through our combos. Ultimately, samurai rotations are visually really simple, but there is a lot more going on than meets the eye. Starting off, we go through our Kasha combo. As previously stated, we want the speed boost of Shifu to get us through our rotation faster. We then lead into our Gekko combo. After hitting Jinpu and getting our damage buff, we throw out Higanbana. We have both our speed boost and our damage buff up, so Higanbana will be maximally buffed. As our most powerful Iaijutsu, we want to get it running as soon as possible at the best possible time. With Higanbana applied to the enemy, we move on to finishing the combo off with Gekko. We then pop into Meikyo Shisui for free Sen, Kasha for another flower, then Yukikaze for snow. This puts us at 1 Meikyo stack left, and all 3 Sen, for us to go into Midare Setsugeka. for a big hit. We then spend our final Meikyo stack on Gekko. We specifically choose Gekko because the Jinpu timer has more time than the Shifu timer. This gives us another moon icon. From here, we'd want to get another snow and flower to be able to do another Madare. Eventually, we'll run out the timer on Higanbana and start over from the beginning. This is after about 2 more Madare Setsugekas. Some general samurai tips: never overwrite a sen. If you have a sen, do the other combos. Never do 2 Kasha combos in a row, for example, unless you're going to be spending your sen during the combo. Iaijutsu is just a lot of damage, so using the same combos in a row is a waste. And obviously, always aim to complete your combos as mentioned before. As previously stated, get used to Third Eye as well. Its power increases a lot as we get more skills. Also, 3 enemies as a minimum to start AoEing, and even more enemies incentivizes AoE further. Also be wary of sync points. Sam syncs really weirdly for some lower levels. Be ready to adjust for it, but a good handle on your level 50 toolkit will make it far easier to do. For now, prepare for everything to be upended within a few levels in our Heavensward toolkit. Level 52, Kenki Mastery. By a few levels, I meant 2. Kenki Mastery gives us this fancy sword gauge. This is the Kenki gauge. Kenki Mastery adds effects to some of our skills that will cause them to now fill this gauge. Gekko, Kasha, and Yukikaze generate our Kenki. Yukikaze gives us 10 Kenki just for using it. Gekko has gained a rear positional. The rear of an enemy is displayed by the diagram shown here. Always aim to hit this positional. You will be rewarded with 5 Kenki. Kasha is similar, with giving 5 Kenki. The positional, however, is from the flank displayed in this diagram. Assuming you hit both positionals, 1 full set of combos will be 20 Kenki total. But we also have Kenki gains on our AoE too. Mangetsu and Oka both give 5 Kenki each for using them. After 2 full sets of AoE, we will hit 20 Kenki. We've also received the first skill to spend it on too. Level 52, Hissatsu Kaiten. On a 1-second recast and costing 20 Kenki, your next weapon skill will do 50% more damage. You should only ever use this on specifically Iaijutsu. Everything else is not worth it. Press Kaiten right before using Iaijutsu, weaving it between GCDs. Your Kenki generation is extremely tiny at this point. You basically only get enough to use Kaiten on all of your Madares. Where in trash pulls, use it on Tenka Goken instead. Higanbana is going to be difficult to get Kaiten off on. Unless you start a fight with some banked Kenki, you'll have to delay your Higanbana until after your first Madare. If Higanbana is worth using, it's worth putting Kaiten on, but don't get used to delaying it, but we'll talk about that later. Our opener from before still stands once we get more skills. Level 54, Hissatsu Gyoten. On a 10-second recast and costing 10 Kenki, this is a gap closer that does 100 potency to the target. This is bad to use in most cases. Use it only if not using it will cost you a GCD or 2, like if the boss forces you to run super far away. AoEs, the bosses of later dungeons and raids, can get pretty gigantic, and Gyoten will instantly put you back in range of the boss. Uptime is Samurai's #1 concern, so time spent away from the boss is to be avoided at all costs. But don't use it to pull. Sprint will often be the better option if you're trying to catch up before the tank pulls. Sometimes though, you aren't given a choice. Just don't get used to it. Level 56, Hissatsu Yaten. On a 10-second cooldown and costing 10 Kenki, This creates a gap between you and your target. You jump back 10 yoms, which is a pretty good gap. It also gains you Enhanced Enpi, which boosts NP power to 320 potency for 1 use. Be wary of using this too much. NP will still break combos even in the enhanced form, so if you're going to Yaten, be sure you've just finished with a combo. Otherwise, it will probably just be worth more to run out, perhaps by using Sprint, and then afterwards Gyoten back in. There are plenty of uses, but this is probably our most situational skill out of all of them. If you are too slow to react, or Sprint is on cooldown, use Yaten to escape the boss immediately. It's extremely quick, so it makes for a very good emergency tactic. You may even get an extra GCD by waiting until the last second to Yaten, but that is a high skill tactic, and is not recommended without knowing exactly what you are doing. Level 58, Merciful Eyes. This is a skill that combines with Third Eye. Successfully blocking damage with Third Eye will grant you Open Eyes for 15 seconds. Open Eyes allows you 1 use of Merciful Eyes, which will heal you for 200 potency. Now, you really should start learning how to block damage with Third Eye. This massively increases your survival in solo content, and can make up for mistakes in party content. Just be sure to not take damage on purpose thanks to this skill. It is a terrible habit to get into, but if you can't avoid damage, Merciful Eyes is a great recovery. Do your best to help you heal it out, and this may even save your life. Level 60, Meditate. This is your first of 2 job quest skills. Hope you've been keeping up on those, by the way. You definitely want both skills from your job quests. Also, the samurai quests are just super good and fun. Anyway, Meditate has a 60-second cooldown. Using it will cause you to stop all action and strike a pose for 15 seconds. Moving or attempting to do any other action will cancel the skill prematurely, so you aren't trapped while using it. What this does is slowly increase Kenki, but only while in combat. It will tick up every 3 seconds on the server tick, for a total of 50 Kenki for the full duration. That's 10 per tick. This skill is basically only for trials with pauses, like for ultimate attacks. It wasn't too common up to now, but pretty much every trial from this point forward will have one such point at least. Even some dungeon bosses might take up this mantle now and again. If the only thing you can do is stand around for 15 seconds, stand around generating Kenki. It's free Kaitens. Rarely will you get all 50 Kenki out of it, but even just a few ticks is extra DPS for you. Now, I would normally go over your new opener here at level 60, but because all we got was one new skill that you can barely use in a rotation, I'm going to delay it for 2 more levels, as Stormblood is going to be extremely important for the progression of Samurai. Level 62, Kenki Mastery 2. This adds an additional 5 Kenki onto all of our normal GCD skills. Everything except Iaijutsu now grants an additional 5 Kenki guaranteed. Gekko and Kasha still grant 5 Kenki per positional, however. But this is on top of the base 5, for 10 Kenki if you hit the positional. This insane increase in Kenki generation may make you think you don't have to worry about those Kenki gains from positionals anymore, but you do. Samurai's main utility is pumping out damage, and losing 5 Kenki repeatedly is a huge loss of damage over the entire duration of an instance. The extreme Kenki generation additions make sense when we see the next skill we got. Level 62, Hissatsu Shinten. Costing 25 Kenki and having a non-existent 1-second recast, this does 320 potency to a single enemy. This is our Kenki dump, and it's a strong one. We can weave it between GCDs since it is an ability, and because we are gaining so much Kenki, it's going to get used constantly. Kaiten won't be enough to spend it all anymore, which let's even see Shinten in our opener. Hakaze, Shifu, Kasha, Hakaze, Jinpu, Hissatsu Kaiten, Higanbana, Gekko, Meikyo Shisui, Kasha, Hissatsu Shinten, Yukikaze, Hissatsu Kaiten, Midare Setsugeka, Gekko, then start rolling through our combos again. This is basically the same opener as before, but using Kaiten for our Iaijutsu and a Shinten in the middle. Be warned that this is Kenki perfect for an opener. You will have 0 extra Kenki, so a single missed positional, you will need to skip the Shinten. If you struggle with this, remove the Shinten from the opener. While it is ideal to use it here, as it will be in the middle of all the raid buffs possible, always be sure to save 20 Kenki just for using Kaiten. Kaiten is our best Kenki spender by far. The gains we get on a Kaiten Iaijutsu are huge. Excess will be spent on Shintens, but dropping below 20 can really mess things up, including in your opener. Otherwise, it is a small but very noticeable change you'll need to get used to. Level 64, Hissatsu Gyoten. This is our other main Kenki dump. Costing 25 Kenki and having a 1-second recast, you do a 5 Yalm AoE around you for 150 potency to all enemies around you. Once again, 3 or more enemies is still the barrier to entry for AoE, so this functionally becomes 450 potency or more. Just like Shinten, we can weave this between GCDs for lots of burst damage. Just be careful you don't overspend, since you want to be able to use Kaiten on Tenkagoken still. But if you have the spare Kenki, which when spamming AoE you will have plenty of, dump it into Gyoten. Just stay above 20 so you can Kaiten. Level 66, Hissatsu Saigon. This shares a recast timer with Merciful Eyes, as both have the same requirements. You must get open eyes from tanking damage with third eye up. It goes one step further and also costs 15 Kenki to use to do a 220 potency hit. In solo content, I still recommend using Merciful Eyes. In party content, spam Saigon as much as you can. This is more Kenki efficient than Shinten. Kaiten is still stronger, but if you have a Saigon proc, it is a pretty decent power boost over a Shinten. It can add up extremely quickly if you get good with third eye procs. But again, don't take damage on purpose. Please respect your healers. Level 68, Hagakure. On a 5-second recast, this eats your Sen icons, turning each into 10 Kenki. This is extremely bad except for some very useful but very specific circumstances. One of which is the most important thing for a smooth samurai rotation. There's also 2 minor ways to use it. The first is after a trash pull, but right before a boss. You have 1 or 2 Sen icons left over, and your Jinpu and Shifu buffs will be worn off before the boss begins. We will want to put those buffs back up before using any Iaijutsu, so we'll default to doing our full opener from the beginning. So before starting the boss, we will Hagakure to reset to 0 Sen. The other minor use is the reverse. After finishing a boss, if you have 3 Sen, you can Hagakure to gain Kenki for Gyoten, and open yourself up for using Tenkagoken after a few GCDs to gain 2 Sen back. But there is the most important use I mentioned. Before, things didn't perfectly line up with long rotations. If you naturally went through your combos, your Higanbana would run out long before you could properly set up for a reopener after 3 Midares. Or, you'd reopen and replace Higanbana while it had like 8 seconds left after only 2 Midares. Neither of these situations is ideal. This is where Hagakure comes in. After finishing a rotation for a Midare, we'll be in a neutral state, no combo started. Rather than a Gekko or a Kasha combo, we'll do a Yukikaze combo for Snow. We then Hagakure and go back to our normal flow. This delays the rotation and will perfectly align us for further rotations as we go along. Well, not quite. We'll need one more skill for the perfect alignment, but this is close enough to perfect for us to practice it. It seems like a minor thing to do, but this one specific change will give you dividends on your performance as a samurai. It's also why I've let footage of a side-by-side comparison run. It seems like a very minor change right now, but by level 80 it's going to compound to a much more important point. Level 68, Ikishoten. On a 60-second cooldown and only usable in combat, this instantly gives you 50 Kenki. That's it. Really. Uses on cooldown for a huge burst of Kenki. Just be careful you don't overcap on Kenki. It's pretty doable if you don't pay attention when using this. Keep 20 Kenki around just for Kaiten, but don't go over 40 if possible, just because you will end up losing Kenki by accident if you're about to use Ikishoten. It's not all that hard to manage really. It's a pretty wide safety net, especially if you're not about to use an Iaijutsu. But when we see our next opener, we'll see why it's a problem. Level 70, Hissatsu Guren. This is the other job quest skill we have, but god is it strong. On a 120-second recast, this ability does 850 potency to all enemies within a 10 yalm line straight in front of you. It costs 50 Kenki, and conveniently, this is the same amount Ikishoten gives us. They pair extremely well together, especially since every time you will Guren, you will Ikishoten for the requisite Kenki. But due to the longer cooldown, every other Ikishoten will be free Kenki to spend however you please. Guren is to be used on AoE and single target. Try and use it on AoE at every possible chance you get. 850 potency AoE is just stupid strong. In a good way, but stupid. Just imagine hitting 10 enemies with this, before adding in any power boosts. That is 8,500 potency. Granted, hitting 10 enemies won't be common on its own, but it does sometimes happen. As for single target, well, as I mentioned, we're at least temporarily putting this in our opener. Let's show off why. Hakaze, Ikishoten, Shifu, Kasha, Hakaze, Jinpu, Hissatsu Kaiten, Higanbana, Hissatsu Guren, Gekko, Meikyo Shisui, Kasha, Hissatsu Shinten, Yukikaze, Hissatsu Kaiten, Midare Setsugeka, Gekko. Then start rotating through our combos as normal. Once again, slightly building on the previous opener. Ikishoten and Guren are the entirety of the changes and play into each other. Using Ikishoten immediately after the pull begins is free. We won't be in any danger of capping Kenki in the slightest. We use Guren specifically after Higanbana because this is where all the raid buffs will be applied. Everything else is doing the same as before. Just now, everything is going to align better thanks to the Hagakure cycles. Do 2 more Midares, a Yukikaze for Snow to spend on Hagakure, and then everything on the 60-second recast will be back, and every other combo, the 120-second recast will be back. Altogether, this was a major step forward for Samurai, both in power and usability. But now, we can finally move on to Shadowbringers and the culmination of our toolkit. Level 72, Hissatsu Senai. This is half of the reason we started using Garen in our opener. The two share a cooldown, so you can only use one or the other, and both cost 50 Kenki. That is because this is the single target version. It does 1100 potency to the target. All the situations you would have used Garen on single target, use this instead, like in our opener. Try to prioritize AoE where you can though. I'll say again, 8000 potency, 1100 pales in comparison. And obviously, use Garen on as little as 2 targets, because that will be 1700 potency. One of the few exceptions to the 3 enemy AoE rule. Level 74, Enhanced Iaijutsu. This is a super simple but nice quality of life update. Iaijutsu cast times have been reduced to a base 1.3 seconds. You can be slightly riskier before moving for AoE or mechanics thanks to this boost. Level 76, Tsubame-gaeshi. On a 60-second cooldown, you will repeat your previously used Iaijutsu as a powered-up version. Said powered-up version is the same power as having used Kaiten, and it has to be done immediately after the previous Iaijutsu. Keep in mind that this is actually an ability, so you can't use Kaiten on top of Tsubame-gaeshi. They do also activate the GCD, as if it were a weapon skill. We can see each of these in the skill list as separate skills. I will go over each now. Kaeshi Higanbana is a 375 hit with a dot effect of 60 potency for 60 seconds. In total, this is 1575 potency. This is terrible. Do not use this. It is ultimately more efficient to just use either of our other options for the simple fact that it only uses one sen to get out a Higanbana. If we really need to do 2 Higanbana in a row due to having 2 enemies on the field, our opener allows for this. Normally we do Jinpu into Higanbana into Gekko. If we really needed the 2 dots, we could Jinpu, Higanbana, Gekko, Higanbana, and then adjust our use of Meikyo Shisui to all be used to gain our first Midare and Tsubame-gaeshi. Even more importantly, this cannot be put on top of normal Higanbana. If the 2 stacked on a single enemy, it might have some other fringe uses, but that alone is ultimately why it falls out of being usable. Kaeshi Goken is a 540 potency AoE to all enemies in a cone before you. That's much more like it. In trash pulls, this is really good use of Tsubame-gaeshi. It's a lot of extra damage on top of our other many AoE abilities. 2 Tenkagokens in a row is just a lot more powerful. Kaeshi Setsugeka is a 1200 potency nuke on a single enemy. This is much better than using it on Higanbana because of the 3 sen cost for a Midare. The potency is overall smaller in a vacuum, but in practice we can get more DPS than doing the aforementioned Kaeshi Higanbana. To sum this all up simply, use Tsubame-gaeshi on cooldown provided it is either on Tenkagoken or Midare Setsugeka. And one final note, I will go over it with our final opener, but this is the biggest reason why we need Hagakure. Level 78, Enhanced Jinpu and Shifu. Once again, simple but nice. Jinpu and Shifu have been improved from 10% to 13% buffs. Basically, they're just to give you a small extra nudge in the power direction. Level 80, Shoha. To start out, our Kenki gauge has been given an extra element. 3 diamonds under the handle. These are meditation stacks. As the name suggests, meditate will grant you a stack for every tick up to a maximum of 5, though you can only hold 3 stacks at once. The extra Kenki is still gained though. Iaijutsu and Tsubame-gaeshi also grant stacks of meditation. With 3 meditation stacks, we can use Shoha. It does 400 potency to the targeted enemy, expending all 3 stacks. It doesn't come up all that often after your opener, what with needing 3 meditation, but after getting 3 meditation, pop Shoha off immediately. It's free damage every now and again. It's just one more skill to weave in on top of everything else. Be wary of the rare times you have to use Iaijutsu into Shoha immediately into Tsubame-gaeshi. This can be a bit messy to pull off. But with that, we've come to the moment of truth. The final opener, and the one with the most optimization to worry about for both higher damage, but also because it just makes the job a lot smoother to play. I'll go over the opener, and then everything else important to know now that we're maxed. Hakaze, Ikishoten, Shifu, Kasha, Hakaze, Jinpu, Hissatsu Kaiten, Higenbana, Hissatsu Senai, Gekko, Meikyo Shisui, Kasha, Hissatsu Shinten, Yukikaze, Hissatsu Kaiten, Midare Setsugeka, Kaeshi Setsugeka, Shoha, Gekko, then start rolling through our combos. Again, the opener has not changed all that much overall, but in terms of pure power, it's been exponential boosts. As mentioned, Senai will replace Garen, since single target situations call for the stronger hit. Then our other change with using Tsubame-gaeshi after Midare for a double burst hit. Between Higenbana and this double burst, we'll have 3 stacks of meditation, opening us up for a Shoha for a 3rd hit. Some overall general tips to finish off. As I mentioned, we started doing Hagakure to make everything line up better, and with our full toolkit, everything should now line up perfectly when done right. After we finish our opener, we'll get 2 Midare Setsugekas and 1 Snow Icon Eaten with Hagakure before getting back to start. Where our first opener ended with 3 meditation stacks for Shoha, for our second rotation, Higenbana will be what gives us the 3rd meditation for Shoha, and will not be able to use Senai due to the 2-minute cooldown, meaning Ikishoten is free Kenki. Because of this, every other cycle we do will be a full opener. 1st, 3rd, 5th, etc. Knowing how to use Hagakure to keep things lined up makes samurai play extremely smooth over long periods of uptime. Do your best as you practice up to do bucket loads of damage, destroying enemies quickly as the damage pillar of the team. Thank you for watching my Samurai 50 to 80 skills guide. Feel free to give feedback or ask questions on what might still be confusing to you. My goal is to help players improve in whatever ways I can. Take care, and have fun in your adventures across Eorzea. May the power of Ananidhogs lay waste to your enemies.